Welcome to Leominster Access Television and Neighborhood Snapshot. My name is Bob Sardelli. I am a member of the Leominster Historical Commission. Today we welcome to LATV a guest familiar to probably thousands of longtime Leominster residents, and I must say a real gentleman and a very nice man. Leominster citizens from not just one neighborhood, but from neighborhoods throughout the city were well served by our guest today, Mr. John H. Crane, Jr. Welcome, Mr. Crane.
Thank you, Bob.
And
better known as Jack.
I know that, but just like when people have former teachers and they grow up and they meet their teachers, I feel more comfortable still calling you Mr. Crane. I worked for you. You were a wonderful boss at the rec center, and
you're a very good employee.
Well, thank you very, very much. In our conversation out in the anteroom, you had mentioned an interesting anecdote about how you yourself, when you were in the Rotary, you had
yes, I found it difficult to call certain people. Like Sid Bell, and because I worked for him as a newspaper boy so many years before, and or someone like Lionel Kavanaugh, to say Lionel, you know, instead of Mr. Kavanaugh. And Rotary had a rule that if you didn't call people by their first name or nickname or whatever, you'd be fined 10 cents every time they caught you. And I can honestly say that in the first month I belonged to Leominster Rotary, it cost me a small fortune because I just couldn't get used to first name basis for people I knew all my life as Mr. Newton and Mr. Turner, Bud Turner, and Win Mayo and Tom Bagley and Don Anderson and so many others, Dr. Cataldo, and I just couldn't get used to that first name. But I finally decided I'd go poor if I didn't. Thank you.
Let's begin with some biographical information. When were you born, Mr. Crane?
I was born here in Leominster in 1920. In November 5th.
So you're 84 years old.
84.
Going to be 85 in November.
Interesting enough, the hospital, I don't remember it as a baby, of course, but it was on Blossom Street, if I remember correctly. It was a house formerly, and then at one, they received the funding and so forth, and the great philanthropic help of the Doyle family, and established the hospital on the hill where it is known today, and has expanded to be such a wonderful institution.
And the philanthropy is still continuing with Miss Doyle.
Yes, Miss Doyle.
In so many ways.
It's a great person, and she supported that and does support the hospital, and so many other things in Leominster that people are not aware of.
That's right. That's right. We're going to get into your youth and early life during the latter part of the interview. I know you grew up in the Bowery section, the so-called Bowery section of Leominster, which is a wonderful section of town. It was then, it is now.
Had a lousy baseball field, but it was a wonderful section.
And for newcomers to Leominster, we should caution them not to associate the New York Bowery and think that that's the way necessarily the Bowery was. It was a wonderful neighborhood then, and it still is a wonderful neighborhood. But you know, we've looked into the historical reasons for that, why it was called that. I know there was a Bowery Athletic Club, and there was a group. And
then there were just, if I may, there were just some of us like Dick Roberson, who became was a transport pilot in World War II, flew over the hump from India to China and so forth, and lived on South Street, was a neighbor of mine, a lifelong friend. There's Arthur Lane, better known as Junie, because he was a junior There was Paul Whitney, and then there was Paul Holzhauer, whose home was on a little street that led down to the Bowery baseball diamond, if you could call it that. It was a field with some baselines, and I might say that Lou Little, who lived on Pleasant Street, was the coach of our baseball team.
The famous Lou Little, Columbia.
Great, Columbia Lou Little. And he, when I went down to the field the first day, I had a baseball glove, a fielder's mitt. And he said, Jack, he said, what position do you want to play? And it was Mr. Little. Mr. Little, I'd like to play first base. My father was first baseman at Leominster High School, 1908 and 9, so forth. He says, oh, he smiled. He says, yeah. He says, well, he said, you got a fielder's glove. Why don't you go home tonight and ask your dad if he might have something like looks like a first baseman's mitt, and come back tomorrow and we'll see what you have. Well, the next day I went back and I had told Dad, and Dad went down cellar and he got his baseball mitt, and was the 4 fingers and the one finger separate for the thumb, like a square mitt. And I held it behind my back when I approached the field. I was so proud that I had a first baseman's mitt. And Mr. Little said, Jack, did you get the glove? And I said, yes, sir, it's right here. And he got a big smile from him and a big kick out, and he says, I think I recognize that mitt. I hope you wear it as well as the other person did.
What a great story.
He was a great person. My dad played football with Lou Little, and just a story on the side, Dad was a guard, Lou was a fullback. And so one game against Fitchburg, Dad picked up a fumble, was headed for the goal line, and about the 5-yard line, somebody pushed him from behind, and Dad didn't make the goal line, and he didn't make the touchdown. And so when Dad got back in the huddle, he said, "Gee, who pushed me?" And Little said, Harold, I did, because they always knew Dad as Harold. Harold, I did because I didn't think you were going to make it on your own. Of course, Lou Little became famous at Columbia with a national champion. And I can remember as a kid listening to that game. I think they played Stanford. I think they beat them 7-0. And my dad had an Atwater Kent radio with two earphones. And so he said, Mother, he said to my mother, I said, come on, listen. Lou's going to speak. And she said, no, you and Jack, you listen to the game, you listen to Lou and tell me what he says. So the first thing Lou Little said was, hello there, everybody back in Leominster, Mass.
And you were listening to this with the earphones.
Yeah. And
wow.
We got a big kick out of that. And as I say, my brother later on went to Columbia and played football for 2 years and got his degree in business from Columbia. But Lou Little was a great person, just a great person, and as everybody would say. And I'll stop with that.
Well, thank you. That was most interesting. Most interesting. Lou Little never forgot his Leominster connections, nor have you. I want to get into the recreational part. You were a lifelong resident of Leominster,
right.
But you did leave Leominster at certain points. Tell us something about that, Mr. Crane, please.
Leaving Leominster?
When you went to, in the service, school and so, yes.
Yeah, before that, I want to say that the Boy Scouts of America, as I grew up as a youngster, you could become a scout at 12, and I did, and Dick Roberson did, Julian Lane, and so many others. And we belonged to the old Troop 10 of St. Leo's. That was the original troop at St. Leo's, Troop 10. And it was a famous troop because as the few years progressed, we one year won the trophy for the best troop in the council, Wachusett Council. And to be the best troop, you had to earn points for hiking and camping and merit badges and passing your test levels and so forth. And scouting was headed by Ernest Boudelier, and we also had Camp Winoxet up in East Jaffrey, New Hampshire, which was a wonderful place to go, and which I went as a boy and as an attendant and participant, and then later worked there one summer washing pots and pans, if you want to believe it, for my room and board. It was $5 a week for room and board, and which was not too much money. But scouting was terrific, and we had a number of councils in Leominster, all the churches, all the Protestant churches around the Common. Unitarian Church was Troop 1, and St. Mark's was Troop 2, Troop 3 was the Baptist Church, Troop 4 was the Methodist Church, which was located between the bank at the corner of Mechanic and the block down the ways north. And Troop 5, I can't remember, but there was a Troop 9 at May A. Gallagher Junior High School, and the Scoutmaster was Mr. Foss, better known as Pop Foss, and he was a marvelous scout leader and a marvelous industrial arts teacher in the school system. Troop 8, I'm not certain, but it's St. Cecilia's, I believe, and 9 was May A. Gallagher, 7, I'm not sure, but it doesn't matter. Scout, and then St. Anna's came in with their own troop. 14, was it?
13.
13. And Clem Lanza was the scoutmaster at St. Leo's, and he was a great, great leader, and he was a real leader, strict. There were no fooling around. Once business started, business went on. And yet he loved each one of us, and when we'd hike, say to Crow Hill. We went to Crow Hill often, and he'd, at noontime, from Arnie's market he worked, he'd drive up the Crow Hill to make sure everything was okay, and then drive back. That's how we used his lunch hour, make sure we were okay. Wherever we went. We might go to Devil's Pulpit, which was in Sterling, up off Hill Street, and he'd go there, and wherever it was, within possibility. So I just wanted to say that about scouting and what it meant. We hiked, Dick Robertson and I and Junie, we hiked every weekend. Every weekend we hiked, and we were up over that Manusnik Mountain Ridge. We knew it almost by the foot, and we built a frame for lean-tos, a number of them along that ridge. We built them, and all someone had to do was, if they wanted to use it as a shelter, was put some branches over it and so forth and so on. And it was a great program.
And scouting is a wonderful thing. And now I'm understanding from why, and we'll talk about this later, but you had mentioned out in the anteroom when you thought you were going to go into forestry, and now I understand where maybe that love of the outdoors came from. But I want to...
Go ahead.
You went to...
Mass State.
Mass State.
Ralph Columbo was there, too.
And you were going to go into forestry, you said.
Right. I wanted to major in forestry, and I did poorly in Botany 1. Somewhat because I was playing football and I was missing Friday labs. I'd be playing football, and so I'd have to make up this, make up that. Well, as it turned, I took Botany 1 again, and I made a 60, which was ground level passing, you know. But when I went to choose my major as a sophomore, Professor Lamphere, who was like assistant dean, you might say, better known and lovingly as Mo Lamphere, suggested I choose an alternate major because of the botany experience. So I chose chemistry. He said, in fact, he said, how about chemistry? I said, sure. I had a chemistry set once when I was a kid. He said, that's a start. So I chose chemistry. And then when I did graduate work at University of Mass 47-49, we were living in Ludlow, Kay and I, Kay Stone Crane, who I married in '44. And she taught school in Ludlow, home economics, and ran the cafeteria program and so forth. And well, I lost my train of thought. That's one thing that happens as you get a little older.
You're doing very, very well. What you have a fantastic memory.
When I was taking a graduate course in forestry, and my major as a graduate student was spread among many courses, which I love. It was tremendous. For instance, beekeeping, fantastic study of work ethic, the bees, you know, really, if you watch them. When I was at the rec center in Portland, I had observation beehives. I had a couple in elementary schools, and I had one in a junior high and one at the Lee Recreation Center.
This was in Portland?
In Portland, when I went there. Well, that was after graduate school, after I got my degree.
So you got into recreation. How did you get into the field of recreation?
I got into the field because I wanted to go into public recreation. I just wanted to. And so I was screened, interviewed. Kay was with me on that trip to Maine. We were interviewed in Millinocket, which I loved Millinocket. But as she said, as we left the community and headed south, because that evening I was to be interviewed in Saco, Maine for the job. We had also been in Lewiston the night before, and I was interviewed by the Lewiston school board. She likes Lewiston because they asked me, do you have your wife with you? And I said, yes. And they said, hey, bring her up. So the school board was glad that I had a teacher wife. And they were very hospitable to her and to me, where I went to work later for about 17 months. Lewiston was the director of recreation and the only reason I left Lewiston, I loved the people there, didn't have much in facilities, but had great people. And most of French ethnic background, French Canadian for that matter. And of course it had the Bates Mills and the pepper bleachery mills and so forth. We went to Portland because Jack Perry, rather, not Jack Perry, Bob Westgate was in Portland, and he said, would you like to come to Portland? Or I said, would I like to come to Portland? I said, gee, I've only been here in Lewiston, I hate to leave it. It's only 16 months I've been here. He said, gee, he said, the opportunity only knocks once, you know. And he said, what do you know about Portland? I said, I know it has a terrific park system and playground because I've went around and visited on my trips between Ludlow and Lewiston, bringing furniture and all when we settled down. And so he said, well, come on down and meet Mr. Doherty, the Parks and Recreation Director. And he set up a schedule, and I met Mr. Doherty at the Promenade softball field. Beautiful, beautiful field, and a beautiful vista out over Casco Bay. You couldn't beat the setting. And so I met Dick Westgate, introduced me to Mr. Doherty, and we had a good chat. He was straightforward, and so was I. And he said, I can only offer you $3,555. He says, I know you're making $3,500 already. That's not much of a raise. But he said, I know you. He said, I have a feeling about you already. You're going to make it, and you're going to earn more money, which I did slightly, because there wasn't much money in the recreation field.
In those days.
Yeah. But anyhow, we went to Portland in '50. I left Portland to come to Leominster because Jackson Perry, the director in Leominster, was a personal friend of mine from the National Recreation Association and the New England group. And he called me and said, how would you like to work in Leominster? And I said, gee, where are you going? He said, I'm going to Dayton, Ohio. And which he did, and did a wonderful job in Dayton, Ohio. And So I said, okay, I'll come down for the interview. And Mrs. Ruth Garrity was chairman of the personnel committee. And I had my interview among others, and they selected me. And I had never thought I'd work in my hometown in recreation. I never figured they'd have enough money to pay me. Not that $5,000 or $7,000 a year was that much, period.
For residents new to Leominster, the Leominster Recreation Center, it's diagonally across from the post office. It's at the corner of Main Street and Merriam Avenue.
Right.
It's the former Rialto Theater.
Right.
Beautiful building.
Right.
It is now
A church.
A church, Christian Life Center. It's been a number of things. It was prior to that, Jackie Boysnow had the mortgage company there.
Yeah,
There was
yeah.
an art studio on the right. A number of things. A beautiful building. Tell us, when I think of my days at the rec center, I think of walking through the vestibule, and then there was the front desk. I think your office was on the left. To the right was the pool, swimming pool. You went up to the left. There was a weight room. You went up the stairs, a long corridor. You could look and see the swimming pool through the viewing windows. Wonderful, wonderful place. But how did the rec center? I know Lunenburg has the Chester Mossman Youth Center. They've just built it.
Right.
Wonderful facility, and. But Leominster years ago had a rec center, and it doesn't now. It has a very nice recreation program, the city recreation program, but a rec center. How did that facility get started? Tell us something about that, please.
The plastic business boomed in Leominster after World War II and before it as well. And a group of the industrialists, headed by Joseph Foster, Foster Grant, and Louis Levine of Commonwealth Plastic, Lionel Cavanaugh, Standard Tool and Die, George Cook, Tilton and Cook, Guy P. Harvey and Son, and then people like Charles Bent, attorney, Bob Newton's Dairy, Bud Turner from Leominster Ice, yeah, and I'm sure I'm going to forget some of the others.
Bill Allen, you had mentioned.
Bill Allen, Allen Store, Tommy Bagley.
I'm sure there are many others.
His business, Don Anderson, Dr. Ed Cataldo, and then Jack Luckman. Borden was in town then. Jack Luckman, well, when I was at the center, Jack Luckman in Borden was in town, and he was a member of our businessmen's volleyball group, Tuesday noon, Wednesday. But anyhow, they decided with the money they had made and so forth and so on, and that recreation was important. Plus, I think the Mayor Shepherd, being an employee of Foster Grant, was a key person in selling recreation. Because he was a great recreation person, tremendous tennis instructor.
I remember him.
Volunteer. And he had charge of the tool department at Foster Grant, but he always had a great love for recreation. And he practiced it in tennis. And even when he had his employees, he asked Mr. Foster, can I put some programs on? And he'd go to it, Shep. So Sheppy, as I call him daringly, and I knew him so well personally, started the recreation program at Foster Grant. Interestingly enough, Sheppy was a great person on dramatics too. He loved dramatics, and he was. And one of the rides he took his employees on once was a mystery ride, and he didn't tell them where they were going. When they finally got to Boston, they had pulled up in front of the theater, and they were going to go to a play. And some of the men on board the bus, as the story goes, said, well, I'm not going to any play. And of course, Sheppy was doing a force feed, as we call it, to introduce people to dramatics and drama and widen their vistas, as rightly you would, as a recreation person. And so he said, all right, I'm going to lock the doors. You stay here. We'll be back in an hour and a half to 2 hours. Oh, no. He said, then you're going to, in his best Armenian dialogue, said, then you're coming with me, period. So they went to the show and they loved it. Make the story short. But Sheppy was a key person, and as I say, the industrialists had the money to decide to form the corporation, buy the Realty Theater, and reinvigorate it with the swimming pool and the gym and so forth.
I remember it was, speaking of the swimming pool and the gym, the gym was one of the best around for its time.
It was.
Prior to that, we had the Baptist Church, and they were very small, and the
May
Gallagher Junior High gym,
swimming pool,
which, while it really was a gym, but it was very small.
Yeah.
The Leominster at the Carter Leominster High School was the exercise room, and with the beams, you had to work your way around. When you made a shot, you had to work your way around the big steel beams. It was an amazing thing. The other big gyms in the area, I guess the only ones were Fitchburg High and maybe when Notre Dame High School was built. That was a great thing, a new gym. But the rec center gym was wonderful. A swimming pool. Leominster High had a swim team then,
right?
And they used the rec.
They had to learn the swim program, junior high level, 7th grade, mainly at May Gallagher. Was the junior high, so it was very convenient. They had swimming classes mornings for those who wanted to or didn't want to, but learned to swim, and it was done in cooperation with the school department.
You ran so many programs. You had tell us some of
Jackson Perry. When I got to know him, I knew he had been in Amsterdam, New York.
He was the first director of the rec center.
And then he went to Pittsfield. I knew him in Pittsfield, Matt, when I was in Portland. He was in Pittsfield. And he did a masterful job. Anywhere he went, you'd have a tough time to fill Jack Perry's shoes in the programs that he started. He started everything. He sowed the seed for speed skating and ice hockey and the marathons, the bicycling, cycling and so forth. And in other words, any word that reflected a recreation activity, he would try to implement. He was terrific. And I can't say enough about him, and God bless him, and he did a great job in Dayton, Ohio. But he called me up, and that, as I said earlier. So, but Sheppy was a member of the National Recreation Association, and he got Mr. Foster to listen to a representative who happened to be Waldo Hainsworth, and how to develop and what to develop in recreation Leominster. And they said, yeah, let's renovate the old Rialto. Let's buy it and renovate it, and let's start a program. Family membership was $25 for everybody in the family. Senior membership was $16, I think. High school, $12, and $9 for elementary school. Now, if any youngster or family couldn't afford it in Leominster, and there were some that couldn't, as always. As someone said, the poor will always be with us. But it wasn't just poor people. They were poor recreation-wise. They didn't appreciate what recreation could be and do for them. But anyhow, they joined the center, and those who didn't have the means were picked up by the contributing membership fund, which was sponsored by employees of all these plants in Leominster. The beauty to be a payroll deduction, that was the key. Nobody missed a few cents a week out of their pay for whatever level membership they wanted. Most of them were family membership. And but that's how it really got started, and then all the industrialists chipped in to make the operating budget each year. They created the sustaining fund which was beyond the building, of the erection of the building, and the sustaining fund each year supported the budget. You might say it was a deficit spending unit. We never received enough money in the community per se, or membership would never contribute enough, maybe $15,000 a year in memberships to pay for all the programming. It became, when I came down from Maine, it became that we might not have enough money to continue professional full-time supervisors. And that's at the time when Ralph Grasso went to be director in Dover, New Hampshire, municipal recreation. Carol Bobby Clark Buckley was a great professional. She and Ralph and Jack and Bob Gross down at Swimmer, they built that program. They built that program from stem to stern, and it was a great, all-encompassing program.
Yes, it really was a true recreation center for, and social activities. There would be dances, there would be all kinds of wonderful things.
I might say, give credit to Martin Burns, who started TAG during World War II. He started that program. And then Bob Kotzebue, God bless him, he continued that program through the years religiously, gave of his time and efforts, and I'm sure money, to help make that program go at City Hall. And it was a wonderful program. As a matter of fact, I came down from Lewiston, Maine, to ask Martin Burns to describe how he formed the board and so forth, and he described all his programs. I also came down from Portland one time to interview Bill Hazel on phys ed and get some ideas. Our Lee Center in Portland was a church, and it was right next to one of the largest elementary schools in Portland and north. Anyhow, he gave me some great ideas. So the elementary school was able to use our small gym and facility, total facility, at the Lee Recreation Center morning for when we didn't get too much use out of it. But that's another story. But helping each other, Waldo Hainsworth was a great recreation coordinator for the National Recreation. He was great, and he traveled all over New England. Anywhere they asked him to come to speak on recreation, he did, and he helped establish an awful lot of recreation programs right after World War II, which I said people were used to.
Yeah, you had said earlier when we spoke a little bit out in the entry room, the whole idea of recreation started to take hold, and there was a connection to the war and the soldiers and so on.
Yes, right. USO.
The USO.
USO. They sampled your USO programs or other community programs. You know, you go to the West Coast or west of St. Louis, everything was public. Public recreation, public. They didn't have the benefit of the private recreation resources like the YMCA, YWCA, Boys Club, Jewish Community Center, and whatever. I had all those in Portland, and you might be interested to know that in Portland we worked through the Community Trust or the United Fund, and all those agencies, we all worked together, and we chose priority targets for programs for young people in Portland, and we decided with no wish to duplicate which agency could really do the job best. It was a wonderful cooperative venture. Portland was a great city that way, really great. And but Leominster's a great city too.
It
and people were very supportive.
Now, people were very supportive, and the rec center operated from about 1950 to
60s. I left in 64.
64.
Maybe up to 70 with the Fitchburg YMCA.
It was the YMCA and so
took it over.
Now, but your career did not end, because after that, you went into serving in another capacity. Tell us something about that.
In 1954, older people were living longer. The country knew that. The Congress knew it. The Senate, the U.S. Senate, the presidents knew it. And with that, there was a interest in doing something for older people. Christian Herter, the late governor of our state, in '54, spearheaded legislation to establish a mass council on aging, and it was hands down, no problem. Everybody wanted to help older people because everybody's going to get older if they're lucky, and that went terrific. And then some people around Boston, Brookline, Newton, some other, I forget their name, but boy, they were dynamic people. They went back to Herter and they said, or to Governor Herter, and they said, it's not good enough to have a commission on the state level council. You got to have local councils on aging. And that's when it started. And so in '56, that was started local. They moved the commission, the council, state council's name to commission, and established an 11-member commission board, and they allowed. Council on Aging is not a mandatory state program. It's strictly volunteer. If the community wants to adopt that legislation and start a council on aging, they can do it. And so in '57, when I was in Leominster, and I knew of the program from other communities, I asked Mayor Cormier, would he be interested in, and he did. He designated the legislation to the city council. They approved it. He approved it. They appointed, in the state recommended 7 to 11 people with all social services represented. But one of the key things about the legislation was that 50% of the board should be seniors. That the state felt, and Governor Herter felt, older people can make some decisions for themselves. They make them all their life, they can continue to make them. And so that's how the composition of the board, I always had majority, 60% or whatever, or 51% older people. And so in Leominster we had people like, from the beginning, Ernest O. Howe, Richard Smithson, Rosina Hughes, Rosa Thibodeau. They were all great senior people. There were others, I'm sure, Alice Burke, and I'm forgetting some I know. But also another part of the legislation was the other 5 people be composed of leaders of service departments that elderly people might use. Welfare in those days, welfare, public health, mental health, labor and industries came in, employment factor mainly, and education. And so in Leominster we had Marty Moran as superintendent of schools. We had Wally Deacon, chairman of the Board of Health. We had welfare was Clark Reardon, the director. I may be forgetting. We allowed, not allowed, but we always specified from the state level clergy. And so at that time, people like Frank Cutter, Reverend Frank Cutter, and then when it came to the clergy, what would be Father Craven from Lady of the Lake was on the council first. But we allowed that in alternate years, other Catholic people could, priests could be members, and other ministers of Protestant churches. And the rabbi, if he so wished, which he didn't really care to participate actively. He was cooperative, though, always. So we had a great council on aging from the beginning. And I could see the handwriting on the wall and I worked with the state people from the minute I was in Lumberton in '57. They sought me out. Would you run conferences? Would you serve on our volunteer committee and so forth? And I said, yeah, and I got really my feet wet. And the interesting thing is I went with the state for, quite frankly, for $9,000 a year.
So you worked,
18, it was called 18 professional. It was a civil service job. Took temporary job, took the exam later, passed that. Then they had another title in our elder affairs called 17, number 17. So that's how it
progressed.
And the fact that Brad Smith was the original colleague of mine with the state. He later left. He went back to the post office. He was a brilliant guy. He was a college graduate and architect. Oh, he rebuilt an old house in Manchester by the Sea. But he went back to the postal department. He had he couldn't stomach some of the, i.e., political strategists, which you take with a grain of salt. You learn that.
So you went from your service at the rec center, and then eventually, what was your title at the state with the elder affairs?
State was, when I first went, I was community coordinator. When I left, I was director of community organization. And it's just one step up, really, 2 steps in pay. It wasn't a question of pay, it was a question of experience. We had a great system. When I went with the state, I told my good friend Lou Galoni, who was recreation director in Marlboro, one of the best in the business in his day. And I told Lou, I said, we're going to have more senior centers in this state, we have youth centers. And before I finished, when I left in '86, I had just completed a study. They're not all full-time centers, a lot of part-time centers, utilizing all types of community facilities that were wholesome. And when I left, there were 274 senior centers in the state, and we did not exclude, we included all the settlement house centers, all the Jewish community senior center programs. They were all, everybody was included, so that the growth was terrific. And then, of course, we went from 2 coordinators to 4. I had some very dedicated people working with me. I had a fellow that was head of veteran service, state level, 19 years, came to us because he could make more money. He was only making $7 grand a year. And Joe Green, he was one of the best. And then Brett O'Neill, I brought him down from Fitchburg, and he came down and did a heck of a job. He was terrific.
Yeah, I know Brett, and then one of my
Andy
best friends is Jeff.
Was politically oriented in Western Mass, but he knew Western Mass like the back of his hand. He was a Peabody man, Governor Peabody. Those are the practical, honest things. Then you go to it and you get the communities, you sell it to them, the feasibility of a council. The Council on Aging was the easiest thing in the world to sell because all of us had older parents or grandparents, and so did the selectmen that I spoke to, town managers, city managers, all the politicians. I knew, I'd just say, do you feel that way about your grandparents? Of course not. Well, look, let's do something. And that's how it really, then it was up to the community to carry the ball, and boy, have they carried the ball. We did do something, community organization-wise, where there was only 2, Brad Smith and I. We started forming associations of councils on aging on a regional basis. There was Western Mass, all the 5 counties, Central Mass, the county, all the way through Worcester County. Then Southeast was, and then Cape and Islands was one. Merrimack Valley was another. South Shore, Middlesex was called Minorca, and they used to refer to it the aging alphabet soup because of all these Wamaka, Minorca, you know, and so forth. Circa was the Cape one, and they served their purpose. This was a great growing time for services to elders on all levels of all types. I have to leave it.
I can tell that
And we had
so much you've served people of all ages, from the young all to the elderly. It's wonderful, and it's coming through that your heart was really in it.
Yeah, and we had a system, a very simple system. We had certain, well, when the Older Americans Act of '65 under Lyndon Johnson came into being, and I knew that was going to happen in '64, so I got off the Council on Aging in Leominster when I went with the state, because I knew I'd be part of a funding mechanism for Council on Aging, and I know darn well Leominster would be funded. They would, on the quality, because we had quality, you know, from '57 on, and so did Fitchburg with Reverend Milton Shadding and Mary Kane and Gardner. Those were the three top-notch. And so we funded Fitchburg and Leominster on Title III demonstration grant program. We would have funded Gardner, but they weren't ready for it, they said. But what we would do as field coordinators in the early days, we would take a group of pamphlets and material, and we'd go say to Clinton, but we'd drop by Hudson and leave the packet with the selectman's office and tell the selectman's clerk what we were all about. And we did that all over the state. And that's why the state blossomed to 347 communities have councils, and there are 351 communities in the state.
Wonderful work, wonderful. Before we reach the end of the interview, I want to go back to your younger days, the days when you were a kid in the Bowery section of Leominster. Tell us a little bit about your experiences there, your school. Where did you go to elementary school? What was it like as a kid growing up in that era, which would have been the 20s and the early 30s,
well,
Depression time?
You walked to school, of course, and whether it be, I went to St. Leo's School, but you walked everywhere. And later on, I went to Mary Gallagher, 7th grade, and then 10th grade, I went to Leominster High School. And you walked, and it was good exercise for you. Well, what would you want?
Tell me, there are so many things we could go on, and you could share so many things. Tell me if you, and this is a rather hard question, Mr. Crane, is there any one reminiscence that you would like to share before we complete this interview of your growing up in Leominster, and or any advice or anything you'd like to share with the viewing audience?
Yeah, in the wintertime, plows didn't quite plow the streets clean, so they were slippery and you could slide on them. And there was a friend of mine, Robert Miller, who lived at the end of Eden Glen. His father had been a fireman in the Lancaster Street Department. And he had a bell from one of the old fire wagons. And he made double runners, we call them toboggans. And he used that bell to, as he came to the neighborhood, to get us to go out to slide and so forth, he'd ring the bell. But we used to pull that toboggan up to the top of Union Street from 160 Crown Street area to the top of Union where it crests and starts down. The street starts down. The Julian brothers lived on either side of that, Anthony and John. And we'd pull it up to that point, and then we'd slide down. One person had to, each time we slid, stay at Tisdale Street, which was a cross street, to make sure there were no vehicles. Not that there were many vehicles in those days, but make sure there'd be no, it might be a horse and wagon, might be Fred Rome sold potatoes, Mr. Britton had collected junk, you know, and so forth. But, and then the rest of us would slide, and on a couple of occasions, the road was so packed. They used to have not a plow, but a wheel, spoke wheel, and it made the streets hard and icy. Well, anyhow, a couple of occasions, we went all the way from Julian down to Central Street,
Wow.
right where Garapies is. And,
Wow.
all the way. And we went right up that rise to Graham Street on Union, and right across, and then picked up momentum down
again.
by Franklin, and right to, and then we'd ditch it, so to speak, in a snowdrift.
Can't do that today. Can't
No,
do
you
that.
can't do it today. That's one of the great things we had.
Mr. Crane, this has been, you have so many, your service to the citizens of not only Leominster, but of all ages, but to the state and beyond has been wonderful.
It's been a wonderful
You were one of my best
opportunity.
bosses, too. I worked for you.
You were a great worker.
I want to thank you very, very much, Mr. John H. Crane Jr.,
Thank you.
for sharing your reminiscences of the Rec Center and other reminiscences of Council on the Aging throughout the state with the LATV viewing audience. I'd like to thank, as always, the folks at the LATV studio, Kyle Pimarini, Jack Silly, Kevin Moran, and today we have Susan Scaramuzzi-Cashman working one of the cameras, and as always, I'd like to thank the LATV viewing audience for tuning in to Neighborhood Snapshot. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crane.